O God, from whom all holy desires, all good counsels, and all just works do proceed, give unto thy servants their peace.
1527 intercity service to Peterborough.
Give unto thy servants that peace which the world cannot give, that both our hearts may be set to obey thy commandments, and also that by thee we, being defended from the fear of our enemies, may pass our time in prayer.
Intercity service to Peterborough and London King's Cross. Restaurant and buffet refreshment facilities are available. First class accommodation is situated at the front. Platform 3, the 1527 intercity service to Peterborough and London King's Cross.
To a Presbyterian Scot on an Evensong crawl, dismounting from the Glasgow King's Cross service at York, the question is where to go for another kind of first-class service. Can there be any doubt?
Lord, open our lips,
and our mouths shall shout thy praise.
It's the Cinderella of musicals, but it seems crazy that it's happening all the time. It's free, it's wonderful, and it's extraordinary that people don't come and listen more. I mean, they pay good money to go and hear concerts at the Albert Hall and the Festival Hall and the Queen Elizabeth Hall, and every afternoon you can go and listen to it in all these places.
O God, make speed to save us. O Lord, make haste to
It's part of the so-called heritage, isn't it, of museums and castles and pomp and circumstance. It's something that kind of goes on in little corners, isn't it, every day.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
Choral Evensong is as much a part of England as Lord's or Wimbledon or Covent Garden, but how many people actually come to Choral Evensong?
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
It's the free show in town, if you actually think about it. I mean, you're not charged. You can go and get absolutely magnificent music. And I'm always amazed that people don't actually make more use of it than, in fact, they do.
Praise ye the Lord. The
Lord's name be praised.
The lambs I banquet we await, so white robes of royal state.
If people don't make use of Choral Evensong, even if it is, as Canon Martin Shaw of Bury St Edmunds says, the free show in town, then why don't they? Because it's not for them?
There is a rather purist thing that it really doesn't matter to the choristers or even the church that you don't go, because it's a very, I mean, they're doing it as a celebration just for themselves. They're sort of doing it for everybody else. They actually don't care, I don't think, if there are people there listening. It seems to be almost a kind of private communion with the Almighty.
That was holy God's almost bed, the devastating angels sped. By strength of hand of strength free from perils to thirst tyranny.
Is it something that you can take part in passively? You can just come in and sit down and let people offer worship on your behalf without you having to make too much effort at it.
It is the one act of worship where you will find people who will prepare to come to have no belief at all. They could come in and actually meditate and find themselves aesthetically lifted, calmed by it. Part of me, and this may infuriate some people, but part of me feels that there's a certain aspect of evens, a kind of like Valium. It makes people, it's a kind of feel-good factor about it. But once you start introducing challenging ideas into evensong, people don't like it. It is one of the very few liturgical acts where people actually go into and don't need to do a damn thing, you know?
Is there anything wrong with allowing choral evensong to be something beautiful into which you participate through belonging, but not active participation? I mean, if you're walking in a beautiful field, that in itself is a spiritual experience, but you're not necessarily singing hymns as you walk through the field. You don't necessarily have to be singing hymns or saying prayers collectively to be worshipping. Philip Ledger, who now runs the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama with the same flair he gave to King's College, Cambridge. Well, hymns are fine, but Ledger doesn't shrink from far older artefacts called psalms, and his sheer relish in their daily resuscitation is shared by Francis Jackson, for 36 years organist at York Minster, and by Paul Hale, now at Southwell Minster. There is the story of Dvorak, who I think he was receiving an honorary doctorate at Cambridge University, and he was taken into King's College Chapel, and the choir was singing the psalm for the day, and of course, being kings, it was being done by the full choir to an Anglican chant, and the Anglican chant was repeated many, many times, and he said, well, why are they singing that funny little tune over and over again? But of course that is really the strength of Anglican chanting and psalm singing. You have the psalms with their magical poetry and their huge diversity of moods. You have a quite simple chant which is used as a background really to the words, as a basis for singing the psalms, and that little tune is capable of immense imaginative interpretation.
I used to enjoy tremendously the accompaniments done by Bairstow, that great man who was my choir master and my teacher for so long. And he used to interpret every word of the songs practically. If there were plagues, then we had them, or we had... I don't think we actually had the sparrow sitting alone upon the housetop, but it was all very skillfully interpreted and underlined and coloured. And I think it was of great interest to those who came to the service, and it certainly was of interest to us who were singing in the choir, and helped us along like anything, of course. And it naturally became part of me, and I inevitably carried on, really without thinking, when I succeeded him. I think that people are accompanying psalms more nowadays in a picturesque way. There was a time when it was considered rather cheap and showy to do that sort of thing. But as with music generally, it's coming back again, and we're going for the more, well, we're going for enjoyment of music, I think, rather than having cerebral music which is correct.
There's the wrathful God, the avenging God, just lurking outside the door. And that's one of the wonderful things about doing the Psalms, is it brings the nature of the Old Testament so vividly alive. In fact, some of us here think it's a shame that there are various verses in the Psalms we're not allowed to sing because they're too brutal. But, I mean, one of the reasons we enjoy the Psalms so much, well, the various reasons are, A, that the colour within them, the great anguish of the Hebrews, it just comes out so vividly in the words, and the power of God, as you say, with the thunderbolts. But at the same time, they tell us a wonderful story. The 15th evening, Psalm 78, tells this wonderful story, and so that's another aspect of them, which we very much relish, the storytelling side.
I think it's almost irresistible, if you're accompanying a choir in the Psalms, to reflect the moments, the thunderings and the quietness of the Psalms. And out of the deep, you'll perhaps want to have a very quiet 16-foot melancholy stop, and you might feel moved in certain other moments to have imaginative descants. I think most organists would want to use the chant to add colour and to add an extra dimension.
Philip Ledger may find it almost irresistible to play up thunderings in the words, but should he resist, in the name of the God that Paul Hale senses lurking just outside the door? Is this a concert to which God is invited? But forget God, are we invited?
I was introduced to it by a great friend of mine on The Observer, who was actually the travel editor, and he was crazy about Choral Evensong, and we would sneak off together and go to St. Paul's Cathedral because The Observer offices were just in Blackfriars. And it was extraordinary that very often Edward, myself, a political writer from the paper, and maybe a couple of other people would be the only ones sitting in the choir stalls. And we were there, alone, practically, listening to this marvellous music.
It's certainly not a concert. In a cathedral, where the clergy are, if not in the majority, one is certainly surrounded by the canons. It's ever present, this question, is this a real act of worship, or are we just doing it for the music? And speaking personally, I hope it's an act of worship. I don't like standing in the middle. I always stand at one side. I don't like waving my arms around too much. I wish that my face didn't colour with emotions as things went along, but I find that I'm an emotional person, and if something goes very right, I can't restrain myself in a smile, and if something goes rather wrong, I can't restrain myself in frowning at the boy in question.
Yes, I know it could be argued that this was putting on a concert, but I never saw it that way. If you were wanting to worship by more active participation, there were many, many churches and other places where it was possible to do so. But I think the very special nature of choral evensong created a very special form of worship.
It's not like being in a village choir where you work and work and work and perhaps do a two-thirds Messiah at the end of it and hope everyone gets the right notes right. You know virtually all the time that the person next to you is going to pick up that piece of music and sing the right notes in a musical sort of way, and you can fit that together every day of the week and know that you've got a performance there.
Evensong provides a form of worship for non-sacramentally minded people who perhaps haven't been brought up in the communion ethos of the Church of England and therefore wouldn't go to the morning service because they cannot communicate and they feel excluded. They're not prepared to sort of do much more than that, but they adore evensong. I think for the other part is that because in this particular group of parishes, we can maintain the beauty of the prayer book service and the beauty of the authorised version and the Coverdale Psalms.
I think, between wanting to be seen by the public as good singers and by wanting to be fulfilled week by week. And it's natural for anyone to want a large audience and concerts and things, and we do get that and even push for it from time to time. But the other side of it is wanting to be part of this tradition and be like the stained glass windows or the pillars or the furnishings or the stones on the floor or the very kind of niches in the stones where people have knelt over the years. And it's nice to feel almost taken for granted, as if people will come in and we'll be there.
Which takes us back to the first-class service which the right sort of passengers standing at the front of the platform take for granted at the front of the train. Someone once said, "You can't serve two masters," and if what you're providing is a service the hallmark of which is musical excellence, then how can you simultaneously make it a primary aim to reach the ordinary Christian fare-paying passenger?
I suppose it is elitist, but isn't that rather like saying that anything that's special is elitist, that ballet is elitist and opera is elitist because you don't understand it?
I think it's essentially something which is beyond most people who are leading an ordinary, so-called ordinary working life. I think people feel uncomfortable about it because of the ritual and the fact that were they to go into an evensong, are they sure of standing and sitting in the right place? Are they sure of turning east at the right time? And will they know the words even if they do? Will they know where to find the words if they want to? And I think people are scared of this.
It's an effort in a way to try and make it relevant. If you've worked in a shop from 9 to 5, if you've worked in a shift or somewhere, to come to Choral Evensong requires a bit of brain power in a way. It's listening to music that's written several hundred years ago, sung by people wearing funny clothes. There's a ritual involved, there's silence.
You find evensong happening just as you did 50 years ago, even more than that. And it goes on, of course, healthily in all the cathedrals. But I'm afraid in parish churches it's gradually getting less and less, which is a pity.
choral evensong is a special form of worship which is really designed for the cathedrals and for collegiate chapels. And it's probably inappropriate that there should be a choral evensong of a cathedral type in a parish church, because it's much more natural that the congregation there will want to participate. So in other words, to artificially impose a form of worship which is designed for collegiate and cathedral use on a parish church seems to me an artificial thing to do, and it's much more natural that a different form of worship should be evolved for the parish churches.
On the other hand, what is natural depends on local circumstances. The rural parish of East Acklam contains within its bounds one Francis Jackson, for whom it has been entirely natural to exchange the organ of York Minster for a marginally less glorious harmonium. If choral evensong can survive this transplant, then assuredly it is more than a concert.
The church is a tiny building which used to be the Methodist chapel. And when the church was pulled down, we moved into this little church, and we have a harmonium. And if it's used properly, you can get a surprising amount of contrast. It's also very good for supporting the congregation, which of course is not vast. Usually it's about a dozen.
To say choral evensong in the country parishes here would sound a little bit odd, because it's choral only in the sense that it's a congregation who do the choral singing. We haven't choirs in the villages anymore, more's the pity.
O Lord, show thy mercy upon us,
and grant us thy salvation.
O Lord, save the Queen.
Evensong with heart and voice. Certainly the heart is here. But if one goes to the heart of what makes the cathedral evensong work, does it not lie in the specific character of the sound of cathedral voices?
There is a quality about boys' voices, young boys' voices. There's a sort of bare, harsh asceticism about it. I don't know, they haven't got the sort of the curlicues. In a way, the sort of what are the girls' voices have a sort of, not a coyness, that's undermining my sex too much, but they have a different approach to singing, and I think the English method, the English form, is much better suited to pure boys.
1 minute one's making a musical point, the next minute something liturgical or theological jumps out of the words at you and you want to put that over, and then something purely interpretational or something historical about the words, and I just like seeing the sort of their eyebrows lifting when they suddenly realise, gosh, is that what it means? Oh gosh, can I do it like that? And it's enshrined in the phrase, I suppose, I will sing with the spirit and with the understanding also.
Now there's a cluster of clues. The disciplined singing of trained minds and voices, of a structured service in the controlled space of a vast structure.
It's a kind of lifting feeling, particularly in the acoustic of European English cathedrals, the tremendous height of the building, and that kind of sound that is disciplined and controlled, it lifts you out of yourself.
It makes, I think, space in people's days. People who come to it always seem to say, particularly if they are not used to coming to it, people who perhaps come to it for the first time and don't realize what it's all about, one of the first things they say is, golly, I've just discovered this. What a wonderful way of putting some personal space, if you like, at the end of the day, to come away from the hurly-burly of the office, of the school, of the street, of family or whatever, and just come and let this wash over you, charge one's spiritual, musical batteries. So I think that's one aspect of the space side of it, certainly, as well as the physical space of making this lovely sound in a large building.
Such an amazing space. I mean, the cathedrals of Britain are the most wonderful buildings ever, anywhere. And to be sitting there, I mean, even without choral evensong, it's wonderful just to sit in a cathedral. But with this added dimension that this music is washing over you. The interesting thing about choral evensong seems to me that whatever cathedral you're in, the music and the way they sing seems to match the place they're singing in. For instance, I don't think if you were to go to St. Paul's or Westminster Abbey, you could be anywhere but in a city. It has a very metropolitan quality, whereas if you're in Hereford or Chichester, which is a different, there's a definite sort of rural, bucolic feeling about the music. I don't know what it is. I think maybe those choir masters are very, very brilliant and have extraordinarily sensitive perception as to what they need. I mean, for instance, Chichester has a much smaller choir, which is what you need because it's a smaller cathedral. Everything seems to be beautifully matched to the environment, to where you are. And St. Paul's was simply wonderful. It was a very kind of sophisticated, I can only describe it as metropolitan way of singing.
This un-metropolitan Scot is spaced out after so much singing at twilight. But is evensong ultimately a twilight zone, a sort of religious Bermuda Triangle, where the ordinary decent Christian practicalities are lost in some weird non-place? Certainly, both cathedral buildings and music offer more space to a Presbyterian pilgrim than the average hymn sandwich of a Church of Scotland service. But is it a God-shaped space? Well, what shape is God? Jesus is no answer, for he is defined in people's imaginations as much by modern film as by old stained glass, music or words. Any human vision is, at the end of the day, tunnel vision. But the thing about cathedrals is that they are very great tunnels. As each English day closes in, evensong does seem to have a capacity to tunnel through Protestant spiritual ramparts, enabling those who are fortunate enough to make the journey to escape to a place wider than logical doctrines can define, a universal place where inner and outer space connect to enfold the heart in an unexpected freedom.
I think I read somewhere that this year Notre Dame, for the first time, has reintroduced choral evensong, and they're trying to quickly pick up the tattered remnants of what they've got. And so there we have these wonderful French cathedrals, which are almost as wonderful as English cathedrals, and they're trying to reintroduce it. So you can see that there is a sort of universal feeling that this is a thing that should not be let go and should not be let die, no matter how, if there's one person sitting in the choir stalls of St. Paul's Cathedral, it's worth having. As I've said, it actually doesn't matter if nobody's sitting there, because they're not really doing it as a play or an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. They're doing it for themselves.
You're not doing it for the two people or a dog. You're doing it for God. It's not always immediately apparent, and it's perhaps not the first thing you always think of, but ultimately that's why we're there. If it weren't for that, there'd be no point.